What's up, YouTube friends? I'm Brian Hewitt of Hewitt Films, and today we're talking about the Heidi Allen case. Now, today I want to talk about the podcast that was released on her 25th anniversary of her disappearance. WRVO Public Media Podcast by Ryan Zalduondo. I don't even really know how to pronounce his name. He has a bunch of things that are not correct, and we are going to address it today. So let's get started.
Her boyfriend came to work with her that day. His name was Brett Law, who was 24 years old at the time. 6 years is a big age difference, especially for an 18-year-old, but it didn't seem to bother too many people around them. Heidi's family obviously trusted him, as he spent the night of April 2nd with her in the home where she lived with her aunt and grandmother, which was next door to her parents' home.
Yeah, no, not really. Brett was dating an underage girl, because when they met, he was like 21 and she was like 15 or something like that. And I don't think the family really approved of the situation. So I think that's why Heidi moved to her grandmother's to take care of her grandmother. But I think the family was kind of embarrassed to the fact that she was dating such an older guy. So yeah, I don't think that's true, buddy.
Brett joined her at the D&W, so he could stay with her to make sure she was safe until people actually started showing up. That's a nice thing for a boyfriend to do. I mean, he woke up with his girlfriend to go to a gas station at 5:45 on a Sunday morning. That's dedication.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan, but there's some things you left out about Brett Law. You made him sound like a saint. I mean, he was dating an underage girl. He was bringing this underage girl into bars where grown adults were drinking. He was bringing her to parties where there was drugs going on and things like that, and people were drinking. He was seen in a bar, like, bouncing off the walls, and the lady, I'm thinking, was a bartender. It doesn't really say in the affidavit or the statement that she is a bartender, but she did that he was spitting on the floor, and she made him mop it up. And she also stated that he seemed that he was on something other than alcohol. So yeah, you're praising Brett Law. I don't get it. Shouldn't have been said. If you were going to say something about Brett, you should have included some of the other things that were brought up about Brett Law.
Let's start with Richard Thibodeau, the last man who bought something at the D&W before Heidi disappeared. I spoke with him back in December. For all of the interviews you'll hear, it's necessary to remember that it was so long ago, because over time people forget stuff, and the more stories get told over and over, there's a possibility that they change a little bit. Richard is 72 years old now, and he appears to be the most harmless human being alive. He's around 5'5", has white hair, glasses, but he looks pretty good for someone his age.
You know, I just don't like this kid's wording about Richard. He said he appears to be the most harmless guy on Earth. Appears. I don't like that, because he's trying to, like, almost insinuate that he's not, that he's not the most harmless person. What are you trying to say? The thing I do like that he brought up is he said that Richard was 5'5". Well, Heidi Allen was 5'11". Heidi Allen was 18 years old and athletic and into volleyball and things like that. Richard was 48 years old. He smoked. And I think he would have a hard time wrestling with this 18-year-old if he was the one that kidnapped her, which he wasn't. But let's continue with this podcast.
But it really is interesting to think about the spot Richard is in here. Why is he filling out questionnaires? Did law enforcement know something about him that he managed to keep secret from everyone else?
Again, here he is again, like, questioning. I mean, he's like, it almost like he sounds like he's like pointing a finger at Richard. I mean, I don't like this podcast at all. He's like, is Richard hiding something and the police know about something? Why is he, but what about the questionnaire? Listen, Richard is an innocent man. So why are you making it sound, it sounds, sinister, and I don't like that. Let's continue.
Now I want to go back to something from the morning of April 3rd that I said to keep in mind earlier, because this is where it starts to come full circle. Remember when Richard called the police to let them know he was there that morning? I'll let him explain what he and Teresa did after he took the questionnaire from the sheriff's deputy.
So after that, he asked me to come down to the sheriff's department and give a statement down there, to take an interview. They were eliminating people. At the time, they were saying they were eliminating people. I said, it's fine. So I drove my van down there. Her and I went down. And, they must have questioned us we got there probably around 5 o'clock. And we were there till probably 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they wanted to keep my van overnight for what? They wanted to see if I would let them keep my van. I says, sure, take it. I don't care. Do whatever you want. So they went through it, fingerprinted it and all that. They went through the whole 9 yards. And I didn't know I was going to be there that many hours. And for them to question me like they did, it seemed like they were insinuating I kidnapped her because I had this van. And this is my thought in my mind. What are these people doing? And thinking I kidnapped her? I was the only one in the van. How could I do anything like that?
There's our first turn in the case. Heidi was missing for 6 days now, and Richard's van had already been examined by law enforcement. Everything we've heard so far has painted Richard as a cooperative person. So why does it feel like the sheriffs know something about Richard that we don't?
Here we go again. Here he goes again with why does it seem that the sheriffs know something about Richard that we don't? And then he puts like this dun music behind it. What are you getting at, buddy? What are you getting at? You heard what Richard just said.
There were two distinct things on Richard's van that were pretty interesting. The first was a sticker. It said All-American Dad, and it had a picture of Homer Simpson on it. The reason I find this interesting is because for someone who didn't live through most of the 90s, that feels like an authentic thing to do. He liked The Simpsons and he was a proud father. It makes me think of him as a regular guy.
Here we go again. It makes me think of him as a regular guy. I'm sorry, but Richard is a regular guy. Why would you say that? What the hell does that sticker have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything about this case? What does a sticker of The Simpsons have to do with the Heidi Allen case?
For some historical background, the same week that all of this stuff in New Haven was going on was the same week Kurt Cobain died. How does it get any more 90s than that?
I don't understand why you even put that in there. Why did you put the Simpsons sticker in there? Because you're comparing it to the 90s, and then you're some historic fact, Kurt Cobain killed himself. Who gives a shit? That's not the Heidi Allen case. That's Kurt Cobain. You want to do a podcast on Kurt Cobain? Go do a podcast on Kurt Cobain.
Gary Thibodeau and Sharon Raposa were arrested on May 25th for drug charges and held without bail.
Gary's girlfriend was not arrested on drug charges, so I don't know where you got that from, buddy.
Gary was being held as a fugitive for an outstanding charge from over 2 years earlier in Massachusetts for the felony possession and distribution of cocaine in Leominster, Massachusetts.
I've never seen this information before. Gary was arrested for cocaine? I've never seen that information, Ryan. Where did you get that from? Because I never heard that before. From what I understand, Richard was arrested on a residue on a pipe, like weed. So that was the first podcast that this kid Ryan released on the anniversary of Heidi Allen's disappearance, the 25th anniversary. And those were a couple things that I didn't like about the first podcast. So we're going to get into the second one right now.
Welcome back to the Heidi Allen case, Central New York's most enduring mystery. I'm Ryan Zalduondo. In episode 1, which can be found at WRVO.org, we introduce you to 3 of the central characters in this story, Heidi Allen, Richard, and Gary Thibodeau. Let's do a little recap so we can start moving ahead. On April 3rd, 1994, Heidi Allen was kidnapped from her job as a cashier at the D&W convenience store in New Haven. Here's a blurb from a document shared from the Oswego County Sheriff's Office To all sergeants, that explains a lot.
Beginning with the 3 to 11 shift on Friday, April 22nd, 1994, and continuing through Monday, 4/25/94, the FBI will be conducting a surveillance of some subjects in conjunction with our investigation into the Heidi Allen disappearance.
There's a lot to take in here. The FBI is now in New Haven, which for such a small place is quite the unusual thing.
If one of the surveillance teams observes the following vehicle being operated by Mr. Gary Thibodeau, 1983 Cadillac 4-door tan and brown, parked at a bar restaurant, the surveillance team will make contact with our dispatch by phone as to the location. You should put a patrol in a position to stop the subject in this vehicle when he leaves the bar restaurant to see if he is DWI. If he is DWI and alone in the vehicle, then arrest him and tow the vehicle to the office and contact Lieutenant Goodsell. If he has a female subject named Sharon Raposa, the registered owner of the vehicle, with him, and she is too drunk to drive also, tow the vehicle and contact Lieutenant Goodsell. If Ms. Raposa is not drunk, she should be allowed to drive the vehicle away, and again, Lieutenant Goodsell should be contacted. Again, discuss this information with your personnel in person. Do not put this information over the air. Do not post this memo, and do not leave copies around that might be observed by non-law enforcement personnel.
Ryan, I don't know where you just got that last bit of information. I don't think the FBI was involved with this case. It was the Oswego County Sheriff's Department. So I don't know why you said it was in the FBI. I don't even know where you're getting this information from. Is it a document that you're reading from? Or, I mean, obviously it's not a real police dispatch. What it is someone reading whatever you guys wrote down. But I've never heard of this statement, never seen this document before. And I don't think the FBI was involved. And another problem I have with this, and I can see why they didn't want the public to get this memo or see this memo unless they were involved in law enforcement in the Oswego County Sheriff's Department, is because when you have somebody, a surveillance team, watching a bar, for somebody to come out of the bar, obviously they had something to drink. They're just in a bar. And if they leave the bar and you have someone pull them over, that's called entrapment.
His van was searched April 9th, and we already know they found nothing. Seriously, they found nothing. There was no DNA. Not Heidi's, not Richard's, not Gary's, nobody's. That's something that's hard to grasp. Law enforcement claims when they searched the van, they found no DNA at all. It's interesting to wonder how Richard's own DNA wouldn't be inside the van he drove all the time. It complicates everything.
Okay, that's a complete lie. That is a complete lie. This kid has been listening to Greg Oakes way too much. Way too much. They did find prints in the van. They did find hair and DNA in the van. They did find items in the van. Just not what they were looking for, that they could charge Richard with. This is what bothers me about people trying to report on the case. Seriously, they found nothing. Seriously, yes, they did. They did find prints. They did find evidence, but it had nothing to do with the Heidi Allen disappearance. Get your facts straight, kid.
According to the current Oswego County District Attorney Greg Oakes, the FBI saw Richard power washing the inside of his van at a gas station days after it was searched.
The reason why Richard was power washing his van at the car wash wasn't because he was trying to conceal evidence. It was because the police department put fingerprint dust all over his van inside and out. Richard didn't want to see that in his van, to be reminded that he was a suspect. So that is why he was power washing his van after it was seized and checked and dusted for prints. If he was trying to hide something, don't you think he would have done that sooner?
In jail, Gary apparently made some new friends. Or maybe it would be better to call them acquaintances. Gary claimed he never talked to them. Either way, they were all in jail together. These two acquaintances were named Robert Baldessaro and James McDonald. These two were the catalyst behind what happened next. Gary Thibodeau was arrested on July 22, 1994, and charged with the kidnapping of Heidi Allen. We know law enforcement had been trying to get Gary since before Richard was even arrested in May. So what was the evidence that finally connected him to Heidi? It all circles back to Baldessaro and McDonald. Law enforcement in Oswego County managed to track these two men down, who claimed Gary was the man who did the crime. The story the two men told went like this. Occasionally, Gary and Heidi would use drugs together. According to Baldessaro and McDonald, Heidi was afraid Gary was going to take advantage of her in some way in a drug deal. So the brothers went to the D&W to talk to her. The informants claimed Gary talked to her behind the store and took her back inside. There's no evidence that Heidi left the store that morning before she was kidnapped. Baldessaro also claimed that Gary once asked him in jail if teeth burned. The two jailhouse informants also claimed that Gary said he killed Heidi Allen with a military-style shovel and discarded her body in a place it would never be found by law enforcement. I want to take a moment to flesh this out, because as horrible as it sounds, it's one of the possibilities here. By no means am I saying this is what happened. I just want to include this version of the story because these two men were regarded as legitimate witnesses. Anyone listening can form their own opinions.
I definitely have an opinion on what you were just saying. Your podcast sucks. It sucks. Your facts are wrong, and I don't know why you're trying to demonize Gary Thibodeau and Richard Thibodeau. Throughout this whole series so far, that's what it sounds like to me, that you're trying to demonize them and make them look bad. It doesn't make much sense to me of why you would want to do that if you're trying to investigate the story.
If the accounts of the two informants were 100% true, that would basically mean everything we know to be true to this point is a lie. Richard didn't go to just buy cigarettes. He went with Gary so he could talk to an 18-year-old to reassure her about buying drugs. Then the brothers kidnapped her and killed her with a shovel. And if the question Baldessaro claims Gary asked him was any indicator, that would mean he lit Heidi's body on fire. Now, based on all of the other evidence we'll hear later, this just does not seem like it could be entirely true. But it makes sense to assume that what law enforcement sunk their teeth into was that Gary was going around jail telling people he kidnapped Heidi Allen. Gary later claimed that he never spoke to either informant in jail, but rather he noticed they were following him around every time he was on the phone, writing down everything he said on a notepad.
Well, that definitely makes sense if these guys were following around Gary with a notepad writing down everything Gary said. That definitely makes sense. That makes it sound like these guys were set up for something, like someone told them to do this. The only thing is, Ryan, I've never heard that information before either. Where did you get the information that Gary said that? Where are you getting this information? Because I try to stick to the facts. I try to stick to what I can see, and what I can read, and what I've seen on this case. And some of the stuff you're bringing up, I just haven't seen or heard before. Where did you dig this stuff up?
Here's Richard to explain what he remembers from this time.
When he got back here, they put him in jail here in Oswego County. And so was I. I was there too. And they got these two inmates that come up from Massachusetts. And at the time, Donald Dodd, the DA, was preparing them for court, for trial. I'm trying to think of how you would word that, but setting them up to testify against my brother.
Well, it's right there. Richard just answered that question. Ryan, you said these guys were following Gary Thibodeau around the jail and jotting down things on a notebook. And Richard just said, well, Dodd was preparing these guys for jail when they were put on Gary's trial as witnesses to what Gary said. So they were brought into a room and basically told what to say is the drift I'm getting.
But he had already lost in the court of public opinion before he was put on trial.
Then when they arrested me, then all hell broke loose. I had people coming to my house, calling me a kidnapper, all kinds of things. I had Heidi Allen's father come over and shoot at me with his gun. The people weren't very nice to me. We go to the store, they grab their kids, they go the other way. Everybody just went the other way when I walk into the place. I said, wow, what's going on here? Then I didn't go anywhere by myself after that. Once they arrested me and I spent 10 days in jail till I got bailed out. After I got bailed out, then I started going places, but it wasn't a good thing for me to do, to go anywhere by myself. So I decided I'm not going anywhere by myself, so I didn't. I was with somebody all the time, constant. So I did not get accused of anything anymore.
I've never heard anything else about Heidi's father shooting at Richard, but let's think about this from both sides. If he and Gary did do it, it's understandable that people would call him names and people would avoid him. If they didn't, that's a terribly unfortunate way to have to go through life.
Well, Ryan, you have all this other information, but you don't have the information about Heidi Allen's dad shooting at Richard? You have all these other facts and all these other documents, but you don't have that one. Interesting. Because the police did respond because Heidi Allen's dad did shoot at Richard. So why couldn't you find that, Ryan? Now I understand the pain and suffering. Well, I can't understand. I can't understand this pain and suffering that the Allen family went through during that time. It had to have been a nightmare. It had to have been a nightmare for them. But it also had to be a nightmare on the Thibodeau family, especially since these two men were accused of doing something that they didn't do. But they were going through just as much hell as the Allens. They had two loved ones being accused of a crime and were going on trial. You know how hard that would be on a family? How they felt? See, these are the things that you're not touching down on, Ryan. You're not touching down on the Thibodeau's feelings or how they felt back then. It's all about the Allen family. Now, I understand. Like I said, I understand. And it's heartbreaking to me to think that the Allen family went through that, the loss of Heidi, and I get it. I understand that. But if you're going to document something, if you're going to talk about a podcast, you should at least talk about both sides. Thibodeau's were at a loss. The Allen family were at a loss. We have all this information in the middle, but we still don't have Heidi, and we still don't have real facts and information on this case. That's what should be being talked about. Not dividing it, because that's what it sounds like you're doing. You're like dividing the whole thing. And it doesn't make sense to me why this podcast would do that. If you were going to be fair, you'd have to be fair on both sides and how everyone was feeling the frustration and the families, both families involved, both parties. Not just one-sided things. And that's what basically it sounds like in your podcast. I mean, let's face it, 3 new suspects were found admitting to this crime that had more of a motive. They had more of everything compared to what Gary and Richard, the evidence against them. There wasn't any evidence against Gary and Richard Thibodeau. But these 3 new suspects, James Steen, Roger Breckenridge, Michael Bohr, definitely had motive, a reason, and they were telling everyone, boasting about it, and just, it's the evidence that came out after this trial that you're talking about now, which was bullshit, is what you should have been really going after in this podcast. Now, you did later on, because you apologized in chapter 3. You apologized that you got some of your facts wrong in this one. And number four, you did relatively well with the podcast, so I'm not going to go in and after you on that. But I did have to go after you these first 2 ones, because these first 2 ones, there was a lot of things that were wrong and facts that you messed up. And I didn't want to go at you hard, Ryan, but those are things that had to have been addressed that I wanted to push out to the public, because if they're just going to be listening to your podcast, they're going to form their own opinion on this case if they don't know anything about it. And the truth of it is, you were wrong about a lot of stuff. And you did admit that, like I said. But, again, people who don't know about the case and hear your podcast are going to say, well, it sounds like these guys were guilty. And this is where a lot of the problems happen, this misinformation about the case. People put in their own facts, they put in their own stories, they put in their own everything, and everything gets messed up, and then you have a pile of papers like this big of different people's opinions of what happened, but not the facts. The facts are 2 families were destroyed by this incident. A woman missing, and people's lives have been ruined over this. 1 man died in jail, alone, spending it 25 years for something he didn't do. No evidence against him. 3 new suspects. 1 already in jail for murdering 2 people. And the other 2, 1 has a whole library of Heidi Allen trinkets and souvenirs, and he's a private investigator on the case. And the other one, who knows? But these guys, like I said before, going around telling everybody they knew something. Going around trying to get their street credit up. And that's what Oaks said, that they're just trying to get street credit up. That these guys didn't make much of their lives, and they're just trying to be noticed, trying to get like some kind of popularity in the community or something. That was Greg Oaks' whole thing on why these guys were going around boasting about it. But these guys' 3 stories matched. But all these people coming forward, much more information than there ever was on Gary Thibodeau's case. So Ryan, I'm sorry if I blasted you on your podcast. And if you guys want to check out the podcast, go ahead. But keep an open mind. That's most of the facts in 1 and 2. A lot of those facts are messed up. They're not correct. 3 and 4 got a little better. 3 was a little... I could have went into 3, but I don't want to make this video too long. 4 was okay. Long run of this podcast is this. I would really do my research into this case before you guys make a decision on the whole thing, especially in this podcast. Look at the facts, folks. Look at the facts. Look at the documents. Read through them. And find out the real truth. The real truth is Gary and Richard Thibodeau didn't do a damn thing. And they were railroaded. That's the truth. I'm Brian Hewitt of Hewitt Films. If you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment down below. Please subscribe to Hewitt Films. Thank you.